Yo guys, today I will show you how you can create this pretty abstract form of art. I don't know what it exactly means, but like I created this and you can create it too in Blender, which is pretty awesome in my opinion. So this is the scene, and if we look for it, it's a pretty simple scene actually, pretty simple scene setup with just this like abstract torus knot thingy in the middle and this ball inside. So I think let's create it in a new file. Okay, so let's delete everything. And before we start, actually, you need to go into preferences under add-ons and search for add mesh extra objects, so you can add the knot really easily. So you start with the torus knot, and I'm gonna choose the third one. Why not? Let's switch it up a bit. So I increase the resolution just a tiny bit, and then I go into under the modifiers, and I increase the resolution even more to 2. So it looks like this. You can still see the vertices, but it doesn't matter because you can just shade smooth if you right click on it. So we have the subdivisions. We have the torus knot. It looks pretty nice, but in the original thing I had some deformations on the surface, and to achieve this we can just displace the now it looks a bit crazy, now it looks a bit thin. To achieve this I use the Musgrave texture, which I normally don't use. I normally use the cloud texture, but in this case I experimented a little bit and the Musgrave texture actually gave pretty good results. So to achieve this result, I used a scale of 0.3 on the scale, and I think I used 0 dimension. Let's see, I wrote it down. Dimension, yeah. And this setting, does this even change anything? Oh, this doesn't change anything. Oops. And it still looks pretty crappy, but change it here. Still looks really shit. Why does it look shit? 1 second. Okay, the dimension changes a bit. Okay, I guess you just have to change with the size setting to get like these artificial thingies that don't look too much like a natural thing. Like right here it looks like the inside of a human, but this makes it look a bit more artificial in my opinion, which is pretty good. Okay, so we can like maybe just a little bit of this. Yeah, looks good. And then I add the UV sphere, scale it down a bit, and we can actually add the camera right now. So you just go to this drop down menu under view and camera to view, and now you can change the position of the camera. In this case, what is really helpful in this is when you go under the camera settings and you go under viewport display, and now you can under viewport display composition guides, you can enable composition guides, and you can also turn on the pass-through, so you can only see what you actually see in the final image. I actually didn't do this in my final render, but you can actually play with the focal length. I think a higher focal length, maybe like 80, and going a bit further could look pretty nice, in my opinion. Yeah, so like this, and then maybe change this a little bit. We have a nice. Oh, okay, and now let's position the ball in the mid. Like it is in the middle, but let's position the camera, I mean. So kind of like this. Okay, so this looks pretty nice in my opinion. We can also give, yeah, the ball also had the same deformations. I don't know if you actually need it because we're gonna do a lot in the shader. Like not a lot, but we're gonna do most of it in the shader. But let's shade smooth, give it also like a subdivision of 2, and do the same thing with the displays. Oops, didn't see it at first. So let's do the same thing with the Musgrave in the displays settings. Actually, maybe we can leave the dimension at 1 and just play with the scale. Oh wow, this is extreme, but this is the effect I wanted. If you actually use a cube and subdivide it, you don't get these artifacts on top. But in this case, it doesn't matter because the shader is gonna hide most of it. So I'm gonna turn on strength to just give it like these creases and these edges that look pretty nice in my opinion. It's maybe a little bit extreme because it deforms like the form of the ball. Just maybe 1, and then get maybe do it a little, yeah, like this. So really low strength, but increase the size a bit. Blow the size, I mean. It's like this. This looks pretty nice. Opinion? Yes. Why not? So the next step, we got everything kind of laid out. Actually, for special purposes that I will come back to, I will lay down a plane. But later, I will tell more about that. So we can go into the shading. Boom. Hop into the camera settings by numpad 0. And now we have laid out the composition, so we can disable these composition guides because we already did that. For the shading, let's click on new, and it is completely metallic, and turn down the, yeah, something like this. And in the roughness, I also used the Musgrave texture. So just Shift A, and then press S, and you can search for anything you type in. So I chose the Musgrave texture. So like right now it looks pretty crappy, but actually it doesn't, like, could be usable, I guess, for some cases, but I usually turn down the dimensions, the scale, and turn the dimension to 0 and the detail to 15, like all the way up. And if we have the node wrangler enabled, you can press Ctrl T and get these mapping coordinates. So like it defines where the texture is laid out on the object. I usually choose, like in this case, because we don't have a UV map, I choose object. And something I learned from Ducky3D, he uses this a lot, is Shift search a noise texture and also give it like pretty low, it's all swirly right now, give it like all the details. And you can also play a bit with the distortion, like a tiny bit. Yeah, like that. And then get mix RGB to mix these two textures together. So right now it's just this one, but if you plug in the object coordinates right here, it uses both and switches between the noise and the Musgrave. So you get like a nice breakup of the Musgrave texture from the noise, which is pretty cool, in my opinion. Okay, nice. So I initially used this setup for my normal map for the bump. So you just search bump and do this, plug it in. Now it's pretty extreme, but like if you go for realism, this is a pretty nice texture. Like the normal map imitates some bumpiness on the surface, and this is pretty nice, but this is not what we are going for. So let's disable this. So what I was actually going for is a pretty crazy node setup that is actually surprisingly simple. So the first step is a Voronoi texture. So you just search for the Voronoi texture and plug it into the height. Actually, let's take the color. No, let's actually take the distance. Oops, my bad. And play a bit with scale. So you can see the effect. You actually turn up the strength a bit, because it's gonna be a pretty extreme normal in the height. So to break up this Voronoi texture, you can actually plug in a Musgrave texture into the vector socket. And it does some pretty crazy stuff. So we could actually leave it like this. Looks pretty awesome like this. But I actually did also plug in a wave texture also into the vector, and played a bit with the scale because this is a bit extreme. 1 second. Scale 0.1, and played a bit with the distortion to like 5.9. So it breaks it up a little bit, and it gets all wavy. And to break this up, I used a noise texture and plugged it into the vector. Yes. And let's turn on the just 1.9, I think, and increase the detail a tiny bit. So you can like do your own stuff. You can experiment with these different textures that you just plug into each other. That's pretty nice. But like I wanted to go for a little bit of an artificial look and a little abstract. So you can leave it at like 2.2, 2.3. Yes. Looks pretty nice. And now you can play with the strength. So you can change it to your liking just a little bit, or like make it pretty extreme. In my case, I liked it pretty extreme actually. And some other things I wanted to do is plug in a color ramp here into the roughness and play a bit with the roughness, because right now it's like really shiny where it's black and really rough where it's white. And you want to break, like it's a bit extreme for my liking, for my taste. So I go a bit up with this to not make it like extremely rough, but like a little rougher than it is right now. It's like this, maybe. And make the roughness also like a little bit less rough. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, shaded. Yeah, I already shaded smooth. Okay, so this is pretty good. And to get like a little bit more detail, this is not really necessary. You can copy this hex code and plug in the Musgrave that is broken up with the noise, and plug it into the base color. So that was pretty extreme, but if you copy just the color ramp and get the colors to, oh, it's actually pretty decent. and then you can copy the code here and get like a little bit of variation. So this was the original color, so we can make it maybe a little bit darker, like just a tiny bit. So you can see some variation in the color. Pretty nice. Just a little bit, a tiny bit more detail in the surface. So this is the whole node setup, nothing crazy. Yep, okay. And I just plugged the same texture into this. And it's gonna be a bit low. Okay. No, I actually didn't. I actually copied it. Okay. Because on this surface, to my liking, it's a bit too big. It's a bit big. So let's change that. So to change that, I copied it here. So it's actually another material. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. So let's play a bit with the scale, I think, of the textures. Wow, this is a bit big. But yeah, this is the change I wanted to make. So like this is pretty boring. But if you just give it a tiny bit more scale, it actually looks pretty awesome. What if we... Oh, this is pretty cool. So just play a bit with the scales and the different textures, and you might get the result that you like the best. So this is pretty awesome. I like this. Okay. So I think we are pretty much done with the shading of these two, with these two artificial thingies. And yeah, let's go over to the lighting, I think. So for the basic lighting setup, I used an HDRI. So here's the notes. Okay. So you search for an environment texture, and I got my HDRI from HDRI Haven. I'm gonna link it in the description if you want to. And I also like to Control T to have like you can manipulate the position of the HDRI here in the Z rotation. I'm gonna show you. It's a little bit much. It's not a beginner tutorial, but it's gonna be, it's like an intermediate. So it's this one. Oopsie. So Spruce Sunrise. Yeah, this one I used. Okay, so let's hop into our camera again and see from which lighting direction I want the light to hit. So you can manipulate the Z rotation and actually change the HDRI, which is pretty awesome. And let's do that, because I want the sun to hit from this direction. Boom. Yeah, right, okay, good. And now to emphasize the lighting a bit, I'm gonna add a sun lamp. Put it right there where the sun is hitting. So right here. And match the angle of the sun. Actually put it up a bit to like, I don't know, 7? Actually, I think I put it up to 10 even. So you can see it just gives a little bit more realism. And I actually matched the color of the sun, so make it just a little bit warmer. Yeah, right. Okay. So I kind of like the lighting right now, but what is missing? Actually, I'm gonna hop into cycles. It's GPU. So let's look at our render or our setup. It was pretty nice. But like in my initial render, I used this backplane with an emissive texture. So you hop into object, give this a new material, delete this, give it an emission material, the surface, and to give it like this this orangey tint, you can search up black body emission to actually highly detail control over the warmth of the color. So I think I used yeah, like this. 2600, something around this. And put up the strength to about 7, maybe 6. This could be a bit extreme. Not sure. We put it down a little bit. Let's see. It's pretty good. Pretty decent in my opinion. So we are pretty close to finishing this piece. So to finish this piece, I used some depth of field, and to actually really carefully control this. Where is it? Here. I used an empty, so put it up on the scene. Where is it actually? Scale it a bit so you can see it better. So I pull it up on the Z axis and put it on the surface of this ball. Oh, I want to move it. Okay. Yeah, so like this. It's good enough. So you go back into your camera settings and you pull up depth of field and hop into this shaded view. So you can actually see things. So everything's blurry right now, and that's not what you want. We go into this focus object and select the empty. And now you can play with the f-stop to actually make it really blurry around it and put the emphasis on this ball. But we also want to see like a little bit of detail right here, so we can put it a little higher, so like something around 1. So it's still like a little blurry around the edges, but you can still, like, this is only always going to be clear, but like this, you can always see the detail, I mean. Okay, so this is pretty much the setup. And the renders, normally when you put them out of cycles, you can, like, they're pretty washed out, and to give them a little bit more pop, you can go into the color management under the render settings and put it to like medium high contrast or high contrast. I do high contrast in this situation, and like this plane also gives like a really nice rim light. Like, it's not a typical rim light because it's like a really soft around here, but I like it. I don't know, it's pretty nice. You can decide if you want to turn it off or turn it on in your final render. So this is pretty much it for the setup, and let's look at it. It's in cycles view. So yeah, pretty close to my final render. So to the render settings. I'm actually a bit new to these Blender 3.0 settings, but like I put my samples pretty low because I don't have a good GPU. Like 4,000 samples, I would sit a week to render this. So I find render samples at like 200, and the denoiser works pretty well actually in my case. It's like still a little noisy, but it works with the denoiser. Actually, I'm actually not sure if you still need to turn on the denoising data. I don't think so when in the render settings the denoise is on, but I still do it anyways. So yeah, that's about it about the render settings. And I'm gonna come back when the thing is actually rendered, and we can hop into compositing to make it actually a bit, we can tweak some settings in the compositing. So go on to render and render that image, and I'm gonna see you when it's finished. So here we are, the render's finished, and we can hop on into composition. And you can also use nodes. Just click here and you do Shift A, search for viewer node. Oopsie. Viewer node right there. And I'm really not sure if you still have to use the denoise here, the denoise node. I'm just still doing it, I guess. I don't know. And plugging it into the viewer node and also in the composite node. So with a V, you can make it a bit smaller. So it's a bit annoying that these nodes are in the way, but you can see this is the render we came out with, and I'm pretty happy with it. So to make this image pop, like really pop, you can search for some, what am I doing? Glare. So by default it is set to streaks, and it's a bit extreme. Just a tiny bit. But I actually like to use streaks in some cases, turn the streaks down to 2, so it's not 4 anymore. So it's only these 2, and turn down the fade a lot. So it's not as extreme, but you get like these little streaks. Pretty nice, in my opinion. I don't know, I like it. So I just copy this and turn it to fog glow. Fog glow. Okay, it's also really extreme, and turn it down the size to 6. It's just a tiny bit too extreme for my taste, for my liking. Yes. Okay, pretty good. What's also pretty nice, like these are the basic settings for like Blender compositing after that I usually do. So you get a lens distortion node and you can distort the image. I usually go for like 0.01, so like a really subtle. And the dispersio, I don't know how the dispersion, I don't know how to correctly say it. You can really easily go overboard with this. So I'm gonna zoom in a bit. If you put like a too high dispersion, I'm gonna just show you for the example. I mean, it's a pretty cool effect, but like you can go so quickly, so overboard with it. So I usually go like 0.01. Bum, 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 to get like this little tiny bit of chromatic aberration on the edges. And now the image is actually a little bit distorted because we did the lens distortion, and you just have to check fit to make it fit in the aspect ratio you desire. For this image, I used the normal 1920 to 1080, so full HD. In my actual render, I used 2000 by 2000, so a square image. But yeah, in this case, for the video's sakes, I wanted to do a full HD image. So this is a pretty cool image. You can actually, if you hop into the shader, you can actually animate it. I was lying with 15 minutes. This is like taking more time than I expected. So you can hop in here, and if you go under, yeah, give it a mapping node. Oh, that is why it looks so off, because it's under generated. Okay, I learned. You can actually tweak the position and actually animate this and make a cool animation out of this. Just by tweaking like the location of the bump settings. Or what you could also do, if you go selected, you can hop into the displacement modifier. I'm gonna go into this mode to see it better, and you could animate the size a bit to make it move. And to do this, to like make it a little wobbly or something, you need more vertices if you want to do this, because otherwise it looks a little too choppy. But if you want to do this, you can just go into layout. You have the timeline here, and you can put a keyframe here, then go to your desired end of the animation and your desired wobble size, and put another keyframe, and then it wobbles. So it's pretty easy, pretty easy animation. So yeah, just in case you want to animate stuff, you can really easily do that by the displace modifier, or you can do the bump in the shading and just change the position. So yeah, what I usually like to do, so this looks pretty nice, but I usually go into Photoshop and tweak the settings a tiny bit more. So how do you export this? You could go under rendering, image, save as. But I believe, because we didn't do the composition thingies before, the compositing is not included. So what you need to do is go under the viewer, go under node, and save this image. So for the sake of this tutorial, desktop, YouTube, lines, I don't know. And save this image. Okay. So the next step in Photoshop, you actually, I had it already open, so I'm just gonna open it again. And the first step that I usually do is, because these images are so like clean, because of the denoiser. Like, of course, don't do this if the image is still noisy because you had too few samples. But if the image looks pretty clean, which it often does when it comes out of a renderer, you do add some noise to it afterwards. So some film, some grain, some noise makes it appear a little bit like it was actually captured with a real camera. And with the lens of a real camera, you always have a little bit of smoosh on the lens. It's always not, it's not perfect when you capture something with the camera. That's what I'm trying to say. And you are trying to replicate the effect of a real camera. So you also add some graininess to it. And I usually like to go into the camera raw filters. So like, don't take everything I say for granted. I'm not an expert in Photoshop, and not by any means, and not an expert in video picture editing. So this is just the things that I do, that I like to do, but don't take this for granted. Like, it's not perfect. It's not gonna be perfect. So in this case, I think we can darken the edges. In my original picture, I had these white surfaces because I shot with a lower focal length. So I had these white thingies on the edges, so I couldn't do a vignette. But in this case, to really emphasize the ball in the middle, which is the focus object, we can vignette it a bit. Just pretty nice. So also usually go into detail. So like, you break it up again and again and again. So you first denoise it, then you put grain on it, then you make it even grainier, and then you denoise it again to make the details pop like crazy. It's just what I like to do. Okay, so out again. So we can hop into the curves and turn down the darks a tiny bit and the highs a bit to get this F curve. Yeah, I like that. And what I also liked in this one is, which one was it? No, it wasn't this one. Actually, a tiny bit, just increase it a tiny bit. I wanted to make it a little bit more orangey, a little bit more yellow. If you hop into the color grading tab, you can actually decide if you want to do the midtones or the highlights. But in this case, I'm pretty happy with it. It's actually not too much to do with this. So you can just It's okay. We didn't do too much, but it, I guess, subtle effects. What I usually like to do as well, in this case we don't need to do this, but what I usually do is to give a layer with like soft light, get a really soft brush and paint light with also soft light enabled and like a really low opacity of like 20%. You can, oh, this is the wrong color. You can paint light on the edges where it's like really blooming, you know, to make, in this case it's not needed, so we can just delete this, but that's what I usually do. So what it would be pretty cool is if we add a layer on top of this with a solid black color. Then we hop into the filters and do render filter, blend effect. I can't think of the word right now. When the sun hits the lens. I just can't think of it right now, I'm sorry. So let's put it right here and do it by screening, and then you can move it because it's not in the right place where I want it to be. Actually fucked up a bit. That's fine. Yeah. And then you drop the drop the opacity anyway, so it's fine. So we do it like this. Yeah, like that. So you get like this lens effect. So yeah. Then you can also play with LUTs, which, like, I would recommend using these with like a really low opacity because they're really extreme. So you can play with different looks. I think I applied like one LUT and played with like different LUT variations to get a look I wanted. So something, this is a bit, no. So yeah, but it's really, you can really fast like destroy your image by these. So really drop the opacity with this. So yeah, but that's the process where how I create this image. I hope you liked it and like do the usual stuff. Give this video a like and subscribe or something. Yeah, and see you in the next tutorial. I kind of plan on doing these more often because it's pretty fun and I have a new mic, so yeah, I hope to do these more often if you actually like this. Yeah, bye.